can turn on your cameras now.
All right, now that we've seen some clips, I'd like to welcome everybody again to Loyola University, and on behalf of the Center for the Study of New Orleans, the Center for Music and Entrepreneurship, the College of Music and Fine Arts, I'd like to welcome you to our program, HBO's Treme Spotlight on Music. And now I can introduce my guests here, straight from the set. We have Blake Lay, who is the music supervisor on the Treme show. Blake was born in New York, but he grew up in England. That's where he started studying music. And in the 70s, he moved to California. He was studying electronic music and ended up working with music and film. So in the 80s, he moved down to LA and became a sound designer. And one of his premier projects was The Abyss, the James Cameron film. And for that, he won a Golden Reel Award. And he worked on many other films in that capacity. Then in the early 90s, he started getting back into composing and wrote a whole bunch of film scores for feature films, and including, you may remember American Cyborg. I kind of remember that one.
I remember it.
The documentary Twist of Faith. And subsequently, at the end of the 90s, he moved back to New York and worked as a sound designer and supervisor again. And there he worked with Spike Lee, Ang Lee, John Waters, and Jonathan Demme, and worked with Julie Taymor on several films, including Frida, which was pretty amazing, and some from their other works. In 2001, he became the music supervisor for HBO's dramatic series The Wire, which I guess is part of the reason why he's here today. And he has also released 5 CDs of original music, which have done very well as independent releases. And he does all of those things today. He's now a music supervisor, a composer, sound designer, and he lives in New York with his family. So welcome,
and
Blake.
I'm 75 years old.
Yes, he did all that stuff in
Actually,
20
I
years.
want to add, this is an into a credit from a record that I just worked on with Blake. In addition to rocking all that fancy equipment he has in his home studio, Blake is equally adept with his professional grade espresso machine, and he can cook pretty good for a white boy.
Okay, so, and next to him is Davis Rogan, who is a native New Orleanian, and he's a songwriter, pianist, music educator. For season 1 of Treme, he was a consultant, a writer. Can we say that you wrote episode 7?
I co-wrote episode 7.
Co-wrote, okay.
Yes.
Co-wrote episode 7. He's a piano coach for the show, and he had a recurring cameo, which you saw in the clip. And then we're happy to have with us also some cohorts of Davis in the band Davis. We have Jimbo Walsh, who's going to be playing bass. We have Charlie Kohlmeyer, who's going to be playing drums, and Aurora Nealand, who will be playing the saxophone. And you will, I think, recognize some of them if you've seen episodes 5 and 9 of the series, because they were all, Jimbo and Aurora, you saw her in episode 5.
And Charlie appears
Charlie
in
was
9.
in episode 9 in the party scene at Davis's place.
Right.
And as you may have guessed, Davis is also somewhat of a model for the character of Davis McAlery, whom we saw engaged in his various activities.
Right.
So what I'd like to find out first is, when did you folks get involved with the project, with the Treme, and what is your role within it? So Blake, how long ago did you get involved in this one?
Well, when we were still working on The Wire, I think it was during season 4 of The Wire, after the storm, David Simon and I had talked about trying to start using some New Orleans music, just as a way of, we spend a lot of money on music at HBO. Like, why not spend some of this money on New Orleans music and send some of that money down there? So that kind of began a conversation with us about New Orleans and the music here, and we kind of discovered that we both had been long-time fans of New Orleans music. My mother and my sister lived in New Orleans for 10 years. I spent a lot of time down here in the 90s and had been a fan of the brass band scene for a long time. So when we finished The Wire and this show got going, I was kind of involved from the beginning. We had talked about doing it.
So what is your regular role? What do you have to do for these productions? Because I know you just came here from the set, so obviously your presence is required frequently.
Well, the first thing is just the selecting of the music, what music is going to be in the episode and what are the scenes going to be. So I work with the writers when they're still writing the scripts. We talk about what, who should be in this scene and what should the music be. And then everything from there on through to the very end of production. I mean, I'm kind of just overseeing every aspect of the music. So at the other end of the scale, I'm also mixing the music in the final episode, and everything in between. Whenever there's music on set, I'm there, kind of just keeping an eye on things. And it varies. I mean, depending on what the music is. Sometimes I'm not really doing anything. I'm just kind of there. And the band knows exactly what they're doing, and it's something that they do all the time. Other times I might be, there are cases where I was arranging things, or I'm kind of the default producer of the music when we're recording new music for the show. So really kind of overseeing every aspect of the music.
You get to use all the skills that you've acquired.
Yeah.
I've looked recently, I looked over the list of music that's in every episode of the first season, and there's just massive amounts of it.
There is massive amounts of music. It's really a team effort. I mean, I don't want to overemphasize what I do because there's really a whole lot of us who collaborate to make it all happen.
Mm-hmm. And Davis, what's your role in all this?
Well, I was, I guess it's funny because I was just talking with David Simon about, so what exactly was Davis doing in the fall of '06? I mean, what was Davis doing? What was he listening to in the fall of '06? I said, well, actually in the fall of '06, there was this producer from HBO named David Simon who was coming into town, taking me out to dinner and trying to get inside my head so we could write a character based on me. So that's kind of really, but that's not gonna be season 2. I'd made this record, The Once and Future DJ, and David read a review of the record, bought the record, and was so taken with it that he decided to base a character on me and use some of the stories that the songs tell to be some jump-off points for the stories about the character. And then he came to town and we met a bunch of times and I took him places and we talked about things, and through one thing leading to another, I was able to get various tasks and duties on the show.
So we'll talk more about what some of those might have been. Sure. And in the clip, the first clip that you saw was the character of Davis McAlery having just been inspired to write the lyrics of a new song on his wall. And that scene is based on
yes,
something that really happened.
David came to my house and saw that I was still painting at the time, and I'd kind of gotten frustrated and bored with the wall. I hadn't finished it, and I'd spray painted Godzilla versus Martin Luther King on it just because I thought that would be a great idea for a song, and it eventually was. From that, he decided we were going to write the lyrics of Strippers on the Wall, but that was one of those songs on this record where, there's sometimes when you spend a year, 3 years, 4 years writing a song, and then there's sometimes where you're like, and you write it down in 5 minutes. And Strippers is really one of these times where I was just sitting on my balcony, and I kept noticing that these girls who had moved into my neighborhood, and you know, changing the ethnic makeup of Treme, you know, and knocking me out of the only, you know, whatever. And so I've noticed these people moving to my neighborhood, and I basically said, hey, blues song, strippers moving to my neighborhood, and wrote it in about 5 minutes. So that was one of these really sort of wonderful, magic, surreal moments when, you know, it's like I'd slept late because I didn't have to teach, and I woke up about 10 o'clock in the morning, and I walked downstairs, and there's Hollywood lights, camera, action, and there are these two girls with great big breasts and really small dogs walking this way, and there's Steve Zahn walking the other way, and they're filming Steve Zahn looking at the strippers, and it's this depiction of a scene I'd written in one of my songs, and I'm like, you know, that's magic. For me. I mean, and it's not necessarily my most significant or heartfelt or touching song. It's actually one of my more surfacey, facile, fun songs. But
what is your most touching song, by the way?
Okay,
Maybe it's Godzilla versus Martin Luther King.
I think Fly Away's got a touch of sweetness to it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So we do recommend this CD.
Mm-hmm.
But
we'll be plugging it all night.
Do you happen to have any for sale this evening?
As a matter of fact, I decided that you really couldn't show up at a panel at a university and then sling CDs from the side of the stage after the show, or I would have. It crossed my mind, but I've decided against it. They're at Louisiana Music Factory. Thank you.
So let's get to some of the choices.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Oh, and then I did also want to add that the guy with the big red hair who has a recurring cameo part in the show, his name is Henry Griffin, and he was a filmmaker for some time. I believe he teaches at UNO now, but he is a Loyola graduate, Henry Griffin. So
Yeah.
I'll toss it in there.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the choices that you had to make of what music to pick for the scenes.
Well, I didn't grow up in a country with, I grew up here, we don't have ice, but you know, we was watching the Olympics, and there's this sport which is kind of like shuffleboard but for full size, and it's called curling, and there's these things, and these people sort of like skate around the thing and keep circling it and sweeping it, and I kind of found that trying to get a song on this show was somewhat like that, you know, that you suggest it, and then it comes swirling down the thing, and then you sort of sweep and sweep and sweep and sweep and sweep, and then it's sitting there in the zone, and then it gets knocked out, or it stays, and I'm not as eminently involved. Blake, you want to opine here? Song
What
selection?
was the question?
Well, what I was going to ask.
I don't know much about hockey.
No, okay. Certainly not about curling. But I was going to ask, how did you select particular songs? And, you know, my imagination was that there might have been a combination of, well, this song had better get in a show about New Orleans, or I was at Tulane last week and David Simon was speaking, and he said, you know, it's really about the characters. So were the choices of music in a certain way just oriented toward what would that character listen to, or, you know, is it a, you know, how did you decide to pick certain tunes?
Well, I mean, the first thing to take away is this idea. I think a lot of people have this idea that a music supervisor is a person who sits in a room with an amazing record collection and goes, wow, I love this song, let's put this into the movie, and you know, and then people send them things and they go, no, I don't like that one. And what I like as the music supervisor has very little to do with what we're putting on the show. And on this show, the music is, the rule is the music always has to be the music that you would hear in that situation. So the music is more than just music. It's not just tunes that we happen to like. Right. Every piece of music pretty much has a historical meaning. It has a cultural meaning. It represents something. There's a reason why that music is happening at that time in that place. And we're picking music based on that. So, I mean, already the choices are quite prescribed when you have a given scene and you go to look at what music would be in there. So there could be all kinds of music that I could like, you know, lots of Davis's songs, I think, deserve to be in some movie somewhere, but, you know, just, you can only put so many into an episode.
Well, and then on the other hand, I think that there's a kind of a you send You know, like I'm a big fan of Mystical, so I burned a bunch of Mystical for David and sent it to him, and so I was quite pleased to see the couple of 2 tunes get placed in the pilot. Or the example of there's this record called the Baby Dodds Trio, which went from selling not at all to actually flying off the shelves of the Louisiana Music Factory, and it's I think the Davis character plays it on the radio at some point, and you see Antoine Batiste's character. It's the one record he wants to take with him when he's kind of crammed into the car with all of his people. And that's not like no one takes singular or sole credit for that. I think I'd burned it for Blake. I'd burned it for David Simon. I think Eric Overmyer was introduced to it by Tom McDermott. It was just sort of like a record that we felt was so significant. And you just sort of toss it up into the ether, and then I was quite pleased to see that it got, some play.
Well, I think I would like to follow up on some of this stuff, but shall we hear a tune?
Are we going to go back and forth then?
Yeah, let's go back and forth.
Okay, well let's do the Strippers song, and I would like to remind everybody that because this is a nice university enrollment, we're not going to play the last verse, so you have to buy the record. That's it. Hey, it's Shillerama.
So you're going to hear just the verse of the song that was in the show.
Right. That should be about 90 seconds, or actually it's less than a minute and a half, I know, because I track these things for BMI, whatnot, but it was more than a minute, but somehow less than 90 seconds. And we have not been paid for that quarter yet, so. Strippers in B flat. You ready? But that's okay. DJ Davis's mansion in the ghetto, in the heart of downtown Treme. There's only 2 things that drive me nuts, y'all: the crime and the poverty. We've got these bums and alcoholics hanging out by Chachi store. There before the grace of God go. I got these bums and alcoholics hanging out by Chachi store. There before the grace of God go. I peeing in my alleyway, I can't take it no more. So I was on my balcony the other day, having myself a little smoke. On my balcony the other day, y'all, having myself a little smoke. When this white girl walked by, tell y'all it ain't no joke. Well, she had great big breasts and a really small dong, and I'm sitting at there staring like a bump on a log. She walked to Chachi's, bought herself a little something sweet, took her dog and a candy bar and walked to a house just down the street. I saw her the very next day with some friends who were similarly endowed. The very next day, y'all, with some friends who were similarly endowed. And as a property owner, I had to sing, 'cause I was so proud. I got strippers moving in my neighborhood. I got strippers moving in my neighborhood. Well, you can call it gentrification. Well, you can call it gentrification. Well, you can call it gentrification for me. I'm gonna call it good. Let's do this is one that James Andrews and Troy Andrews played in the airport scene, a scene I wrote. So we'll give you our best stuff. This is Oop-Oop-A-Doo then. Whoa, 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 oh yeah, oh yeah. Let me tell you about Oop-Oop-A-Doo. Yeah, they call me the most. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Never gonna call me the most. Call me the most. Charlie Kohlmeyer, Jimbo Walsh, Aurora Nealand. I guess.
Yeah, maybe it didn't occur to me, but maybe we can get an extra chair so Aurora can hang out and you might have something to say. Yeah. Well, we'll see if somebody can find an extra chair. We'll work that out while we chit-chat. We know that you wrote Strippers, but who wrote Ooh Boo Ba Doo?
Ooh Boo Ba Doo was a Jesse Hill composition. He was a drummer and a tambourine player and a songwriter who did a lot of work with Dr. John and people like this. And his grandsons are, grant-nephews are James Andrews and Trombone Shorty. So the chance for them was justified they're playing it on the show.
So,
and Huey Piano Smith, that other song, we haven't had any Huey Piano Smith yet, and I can only imagine that's going to be rectified.
Actually, I think there was
Is there Huey Smith?
somewhere, was there?
Well,
Yeah.
I think there was one tune.
Okay.
Minor.
I printed myself this list and I realized that there are certain tunes in the show that you don't notice as much because you're paying attention to what the character's doing and they're talking in the bar. One of the things I was really fascinated by when I looked at just the total list of songs was that, as you said, there are certain reasons for the character listening to those tunes. Yay! Well, can we put it over here? Okay. It'll all work out. You'll see. No, come over here. Come where you're, yeah, so you can sit at your spot. Yes. We want you front and center. Thank you very much. What was I just saying? Oh, so what I noticed was that, for example, Albert Lambreau, the Mardi Gras Indian chief that we saw in the one scene there, when he's just in his place, he likes to listen to modern jazz, well, sort of
Old school, really.
old school jazz, yeah. Yeah, that's what
blues.
yeah, there's,
Lester
Miles
Young,
Davis, Coleman Hawkins.
Yeah.
Yeah, I shouldn't have referred to that as modern.
jazz.
That
No.
modern.
No, I don't
New
think
Orleans.
so.
Yeah,
I don't
Lester
think
is
so.
about as modern as we get around here.
But I didn't want to say all bebop because it's not all bebop. So
Right.
he likes the older jazz, yeah. And then the jukebox at Gigi's seems to be sort of very classic New Orleans,
And
New
Memphis
Orleans
soul,
R&B, yeah.
Oh,
And
Well, if this is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Blake, but I think this is one of the things that was true for The Wire that carried over into Treme, as opposed to other shows where you watch and a song is floated in or a song is just magically appearing overhead, that everything in The Wire and Treme is source music, which is to say it's coming from somebody's radio, it's being played in the bar while people are talking, and that's that was similar to this show.
Yeah, I mean, that's just David's style of storytelling. That's how he does things. On The Wire, it was very strict. I mean, the music was only ever sourced, except for really one time per season we would have
A montage, right?
a montage. In Treme, we play around with that a little bit more. There were, in the first season, there were probably 4 or 5 times where we had music montages.
Montages,
I mean, in the Mardi Gras episode, there was a long use of Professor Longhair where it goes over a whole bunch of scenes. But in general, the music, any music you hear is very strictly, it's coming from a source that's really in the scene and it's there. It's not score. It's not there just to make the mood. It's part of the actual sound landscape of the place.
And then from time to time, a lot of that will play. The song itself will play against what the scene is. Because I remember, just in case y'all had wanted to ask one of these questions, I was like, I'm noticing in season 4 of The Wire, and they're in Proposition Joe's, repair shack, and they're listening to Hey Pocky Way, but there's actually all this menacing, horrible stuff going on. Why do you have a party record going? It's but that's because they don't like we're sad, cue the minor song. We're happy, cue the upbeat song. It's what's playing at the time, and that can sometimes it's not set up straight to augment. It can sometimes go or sometimes doesn't. It's as happenstance.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the time music is playing against the mood of the scene. I mean, that's what happens in real life. If you're happy and you go into a bar, doesn't mean like happy music is going to be playing. You know, it's like often it's the opposite, really.
Right. Or that really fun song you liked until you got into that horrible fight with someone, and then it's going to be ruined forever. That kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think also, you know, I think there's when people are placing music into a storytelling context, I think sometimes there's this idea that it's clever or cute to put a song in that comments on the action in this way that. I try not to do that. A lot of the time, the way we place the music is we try to make it feel more real, like the way you hear music in real life. So it's a little more random, and I mean, occasionally there will be resonances between the music and the scene, but often being on point is something that we try not to do. Again, it's a storytelling technique. So rather than having lyrics in a song that's commenting on what's happening in the scene, no, it should be something totally different.
I noticed that when David Simon was at Tulane, I think that was just last Thursday, he said that what you are looking at in the scene is also what the characters are looking at. So generally, there's a sort of intimate feel because it's just the view from that one person or those couple of people who are in the scene. It's what they're seeing. So sounds like you're saying that the music is going along with that.
Yeah, I mean, you're thinking about whose point of view are we illustrating here? It's true. Again, another storytelling technique. There's very rarely use of like big crane shots, for instance. And sometimes the directors of an episode, they want to do that. They'll like, wouldn't it be cool? Just because it would look great if at the end of the scene the camera goes on a crane and comes up and is looking down, and Simon will be like, well, why are we up in the sky looking down on this thing? Whose point of view is that?
One of the things that I've observed about your music, Davis, is that it has sometimes a lot of feel of the New Orleans R&B. Mm-hmm. And so I was wondering what you would say are, I mean, we should kind of get to what are the characteristics of New Orleans R&B and what's so much fun about that for you?
Well, I guess, there's big, huge chunks of there's early jazz, and then there's, jump blues, early R&B. Early R&B becomes the dawn of rock and roll. The dawn of rock and roll becomes, the funk, and then there's the Indian thread that goes through that, and the jazz thread that goes through that. And there's none of this is easy, dyed-in-the-wool categories.
Right.
But there was this sort of heyday classic New Orleans R&B, and I guess that the band I was in before this was called All That, and it was trying very much to be in the 1970s, Meters, Neville Brothers, Wild Tchoupitoulas kind of funk vein. And after that ran its course, I kind of thought that I was going to go back to something simpler, where I could hire 3 people instead of 7. No offense against the other 4 guys. It's just we hardly get paid as it is, as you know. So a simpler setup. But also to sort of hark back to what I thought was one of my favorite periods of New Orleans music. And some people, so first of all, it was the time, where Fats Domino was the guy who broke the color barrier. So he was like the first African-American, one of, if not the first African-American to have records on the top 10 in the pop charts, not just the race charts. So there was a sense where New Orleans music was informing the nation, and some of it was wildly commercially successful, and other parts of it were just wildly influential, which could lead to us talking about Smiley Lewis, if that was that the lead-in to Smiley Lewis?
It could have been.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Smiley Lewis lead-in. Smiley Lewis was a guy who he had this incredible feel, and he wrote, I think the thing about like my music and why I'm so attracted to New Orleans R&B is because the music is so serious, and yet lyric-wise and in spirit, it just doesn't take itself seriously, which doesn't mean that it's frivolous. It means that it's really about enjoying yourself or being able to cut loose. And I think that spirit lacks in a lot of music. Smiley Lewis, it's funny because he, as if any of y'all have been going to watch, Dave Bartholomew's been speaking lately, and he's actually going to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame next weekend, along with Fats Domino. And Smiley Lewis wrote all of these great songs, and what would happen is he wrote "I Hear You Knockin'," and I think that was covered by Gail Storm, and Gail Storm went and had a hit with it, and Smiley Lewis never saw anything. And he wrote "One Night of Sin," and Elvis Presley cleaned it up and made it "One Night with You," and Elvis Presley went on and had a big hit with it, and he never saw anything. And he wrote "Blue Monday," which was actually taken by Fats Domino as opposed to, Pat Boone, but Pat Boone also took another one of his hits and ran off and had something with it. Shame, Shame, Shame was going to be his big breakout record, and it was going to be it's the Elia Kazan film of the Tennessee Williams movie, a movie of the Tennessee Williams play Baby Doll, and it was written for this thing, Shame, 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 and this was going to be like the #1 soundtrack hit chart. And then what happened is, I think it was the Catholic Legion of Decency and these other people came and completely shut the movie down, and it didn't see any distribution, and it didn't go anywhere. So there was a feeling that Dave Bartholomew had, and I think there was a to set some stuff up for how the Shame, Shame, Shame song came into the show. David and I had gone to this thing honoring Dave Bartholomew at the Blue Room, and Dave Bartholomew, the one thing he'd had to say at 90 was, "Man, of all the people I've produced, it was such a shame that Smiley Lewis never got his due." And David had said that for the longest time that he had always envisioned, he always wanted Kermit to cover Shame, Shame, Shame. He's like, wouldn't it be great if Kermit covered Shame, Shame, Shame when that part was played, Kermit could play with his trumpet. And I was like, well, David, I think the best way to get Kermit to do anything would be to probably have him cover it. It's like if you give there's an economic impetus for you playing the song Shame, 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 then there is a possibility that it would creep into his set list. And from that, we decided that the Davis character was going to be writing a song, and I had sort of quasi-consignment on spec. I had written several spec songs about the Davis character saying mean and nasty things about George Bush, which all of us, some of us felt in our hearts in the wake of what happened to us. So I had a rap song skewing Bush and Cheney, and I had a this song skewing Bush and Cheney, and I remember it came to me, it was like, wasn't this during the, I didn't have nothing to do, and then 1 month I wrote half a script, composed 2 songs for the show, appeared in 3 scenes, and did something else, and then they gave me a big check, and the Saints won the Super Bowl, and I didn't have to work again. It was great, but at this time, Blake said, David wants you to write a set of lyrics for Shame, Shame, Shame. And I wrote a set of lyrics, and I think that Simon took a look at those and went, aha, and wrote this very funny little Shame, Shame, Shame version himself.
He threw yours away and wrote better ones, I think.
Yes.
That's a nice way of saying it.
He threw mine away and wrote better ones. I could also say I set for the spike, but there's actually no money in that, so you could say he threw it away, but Shame, Shame, Shame. Also the concept of Davis assembling a large band for no money and recording. I think I remember Ben Ratliff for MTV. For those of you some of us who had little to do and a laptop in their bed, sat around and read lots of stuff on the internet about the show. And he was like, oh, that's so impossible that they'd be able to put together a band of this size for no money and record all those songs. And I was like, actually, that's kind of how we do it down here, but.
Yeah, I think you owe some of these folks some money for the first recording, perhaps. Yeah, actually, you have worked with every one of those people in that scene.
Yeah.
The Pfister sisters you might have recognized from the clip. Galactic, sax player Ben Ellman.
Ben Ellman, yeah, who's also on the record.
Right, and
Tyrus Chapman had played with all that. I played with Kermit Ruffins in the early 90s. Jimbo is in my band, and then the Pfister sisters. Actually, Debbie Davis had done, and Aurora is in and out of the Davis Project based on her availability, and Debbie had done some singing with the group, my group All That. And actually, if you want, I can also. This sets up the music for the Davis for Council stuff, or we could go other places. So.
Yeah, we could do that. What was I going to say? I just did want to say one thing, which was that unfortunately in the clip, in the final scene with Shame, 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 the camera is doing a close-up of Ben Elman while Aurora is playing her solo, and
Is that true?
yeah, yeah, but but she was playing a wonderful solo there. Yes, let's have a little more music.
Okay.
We'll go back and forth and try to keep you entertained.
All right. Hurricane. Not that I'm solely featuring stuff from my record, but it's stuff I know. So this song called Hurricane, and the thing about Hurricane was it was kind of like a fun New Orleans rhythm and blues song that I wrote in the summer of 2005, prior to the storm. And I wrote a song. Remember the Katrina was the K when there was like
Cindy, it was Cindy. It was Cindy, yeah.
It was category 1, and it sort of occurred to me at that time that there are people who get their cars and run, and there are people who stay. And so I thought I would write a song about that. And then I wrote it and recorded it, and I actually put the disc in the mail to go to disc makers, and I put it at the post office on the 28th of August of 2005. And it was able to resurface, but this is sort of, it also takes one of my favorite, can I say tropes? It's college, you can say tropes. One of my favorite R&B tropes, and that's the male-female dialogue done by just the guy, which I've very much stolen from Smiley Lewis. So here's a song called Hurricane. And then we'll favor you with the Shame, 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 and I have David Simon's lyrics right here, so we'll do that after that. So the first one we'll do in E flat, and the second one I guess we'll just do in C because it was in C. So, but anyway, Hurricane, as we all know and well, so from having done, this one's, yeah. Standing on the corner with your umbrella in your hand. Standing on the corner, keeping out the pouring rain. Umbrella won't help you when they hit you with the hurricane. I'm gonna buy me a P-roll, lash it to my balcony. Little boat, baby, enough room for you and me. When the water comes to meet us, we'll float on out to sea. Well, they all evacuating. I ain't going. Some folks ain't waiting. I ain't going. Category 7. I ain't going. Knock us all to heaven. I ain't going. I stay in New Orleans with a cold drink in my hand. Will you open up the highway, trying to get your contraflow? Folks are stuck in traffic, got no place to go. Well, I kick it out of my house, I won't say I told you so. Miles lasted for Betsy, and it stood through Camille. 'Cause back when they built my house, they was building houses for real. I'm gonna stay on the premises so I can be here to deal. Well, I got me my water. I ain't going. Camp stove with a shotgun. I ain't going. You do what you oughta. I ain't going. But I'ma stay here, son. I ain't going. I'll stay in New Orleans with a cold drink in my hand. Oh, baby, they say we gotta leave. I heard the big one's coming. Bob Brexit. Well, I heard Nash Roberts say it wasn't coming. Well, Nash Roberts, where'd you hear that? Well, I was behind him in line at the grocery store. I said, we don't need to go, baby. We got everything we need right here. We got some whiskey. We got the piano. Category 7 hurricane coming. You just want to drink whiskey and play piano. Well, that's not true, baby. You know, the nice one, we can snuggle. Well, I don't know about you. I'm going to get my 1987 Geo Prism and get stuck in gridlock on I-20. But I don't know, baby, because I'm going to stay here, you know. Because I'm going down with the boat. Because that's all she wrote. Well, I got me my water. I ain't going. Camp stove and a shotgun. I ain't going. You do what you oughta. I ain't going. But I'm gonna stay here, son. I ain't going. I'll stay in New Orleans with a cold drink in my hand. Thanks. Now, I never took the term to bother to learn this one because I didn't get paid. But, yeah, no, okay, here there. So let's try this. Our recreation of the song that we recreated in Word of Mouth Studios, which was actually, it was very nice for me to use the studio that I had used to record my records, and I actually was able to get the engineer to like give me time on credit because I brought him this gig. And just in case you're wondering how these things work and one hand washes the other, all you people in the music business students, remember, it's all about that kind of thing. So anyway. Look up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. Oh yeah. I'm with you, New Orleans. Bring this bird down just to 8,000 feet. Let's have a look-see. Oh no, that's not good. That's not good at all. Your foliage is wet, really wet. It must be twice as bad on the ground. Twice as bad? Twice as bad? You think? Shame, shame, shame on you now, W. Shame, shame, shame on you now, W. Shame, shame, shame for what you've done. When we was on the roads, we were down and out. You flew on over, never did come down. Shame, shame, shame on you now, W. Shame, shame, shame on you now, W. Shame, shame, shame for what you've done. Now, Georgie, I think it's all well and good to do what you did for those wet color folks. I know you mean well. I was just over at the Astrodome. Now, Ma, you know the Stros don't play no more. It ain't like we don't have room for them in Houston. Yeah, but it's such a lovely place. It's practically part of the neighborhood. And all those people camped out in the 50-yard line. It's almost nicer there than they were before the storm. All the space themselves. Okay, yeah, that's kind of a cheap shot, except it didn't make sense to us. Barbara Bush had said some of that. Rocky comes and flow, there was a prong to and fro, but you're thinking we're fine on the Astrodome flow. Shame, shame, shame on you now, W. Shame, shame, shame on you now, W. Shame, shame, shame for what you've done. So dig it. Now we got people in New Orleans living in Air Force bases and ratty-ass motels from Utah to Georgia. And people in Washington talking about keeping the projects closed. Yeah, that's right. They don't want no poor people coming back to New Orleans. But I'll tell you right, New Orleans ain't New Orleans without poor people. Because it's the poor people without a pot to piss in who keep the beat and blow the horns and step in the street. And right now they're listening to this mess up white boy because whichever 14-year-old from the Lafitte Projects is next to Smiley Lewis, he's stuck in East Bumfuck, Texas. And he can't get home to sing this effing song. Shame, shame, shame on you now, W. Shame, shame, shame on you now, W. Shame, shame, shame for what you've done.
Okay, here's a question for you, Blake. recently saw again that sort of pre-appearance sort of little documentary thing that HBO made before the show came out, the promo.
Okay.
It was a long promo thing.
Right.
And I don't know what you call those, but anyway.
The long promo
The long promo thing.
Yeah.
And in it, you said that you had actually thought of how the original tunes that a lot of the original tunes that were used in the show were recorded, so you would put one mic in the middle of the room and try to actually reproduce the sound of the actual recordings.
Yeah, I mean, to some degree. I mean, that's kind of just one of those things that you say in an interview. No, I'm kidding now. It's, I mean, the Cosimo Murata's recording techniques, I mean, that's one of the things that they did on a lot of those classic old R&B records. They were actually recorded with one mic. So it's not so much that when we were deciding how to record the music on the show, we decided to use one mic because of that. But and the irony is in that promo, in fact, we were standing in a room talking about how all the music is live and recorded with one mic, and that actual music, that version of Shame, Shame, Shame was not recorded live. It was recorded using a whole bunch of mics. Mm-hmm. But there is an aesthetic that we're trying to achieve on the show of the music feeling live and not feeling overproduced, and having an immediacy to it that is often best achieved by just recording it in a very simple way.
And it was funny, I was just noticing that I think it was the premiere episode of Boardwalk Empire, and there's a brass band walking down the street, and the band is playing and the drum is hitting, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the song as it's playing, and I kind of think it's sort of like a Martin Scorsese aerial way, whereas we can talk. I mean, I think one of the most interesting things, is anyone ever curious as to how Wendell Pierce does the trombone thing? Can I have a show of hands if that's a worthy? No one cares how Wendell Pierce does it? 2, 3, 4. Okay. Well, so what we do, what's done there? Blake, you want to take this one?
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
now that I've wound him up. Like lately.
Wendell doesn't really play the trombone, but again, because we want the music to be played live, his stuff is played by Stafford A.G., the trombonist from the Rebirth Brass Band, and Stafford is off camera playing the trombone. And we have to go to great lengths for Wendell to learn all of the positions. So I mean, Wendell has been learning trombone for a couple of years now, and he's quite good.
You make a film, and then you make a film. So Stafford records a solo, then they film the solo.
Yeah, I mean, so that Stafford and Wendell can play the same thing. I mean, they're not improvising. Everyone else is improvising, but we have to decide beforehand exactly what notes Wendell is going to play in every case, so that he can learn it and him and Stafford can both play it. So we go into a studio beforehand.
Painstakingly correct positions.
We
That's great.
decide what he's going to play, and then they both learn it.
And I think, I mean, and also so much of in other films and television shows is that the music is always in the canon, the music is always mimed, and that has happened 1 or 2 occasions in season 1, but that's really the exception to the rule as opposed to the rule, which it is for just about everything else. So that makes it groundbreaking in its own way.
That's very
never before this much, interest in New Orleans, never before this much interest in New Orleans music, and never before this much actual playing live. So it's a first in a lot of things.
I'd like to get back to, I think it was very interesting what you said about how the music selected for the particular scenes has a meaning and a significance and a history. Can you talk about some of the locations or scenes or characters and what were your concerns about what music they would be listening to?
Help me think of a good example.
Well, I mean, what were the kids in the car listening to when they were driving to Houston to party, or what would Sonny isn't listening to the same kind of music that Lambro's listening to, or actually, how about Antoine Baptiste, like the song that he winds up singing along with in the bar, the Memphis Blues song in episode 4, is that?
Yeah, right.
We're like going vague and saying, yeah, right. Can we let's bring it a little closer?
Well, I mean, it's. I'm just trying to think of something where it's not so reductive. I mean, because it is what you do, what you always do with music in a film is, it's like. I mean, some people are listening to, the cowboys all listen to country music and like that. But this is. I'm kind of drawing a blank
Well,
here.
here's just something interesting. I noticed that when there were potential choices of, these characters could have been listening to almost anything, like Davis's parents, who are absolutely nothing like Davis's real parents, and the neighbors of Davis are listening. They tended to listen to more classical music. And in a couple of those cases, you picked Gottschalk,
Right.
Louis Moreau Gottschalk, who has ties to this area, and so
Sure.
there was some choice of some Haydn and some Bach. Actually, that was for Annie, but you chose two separate pieces of Gottschalk for people who
Right.
like to listen to classical music, and I thought that was really fun that you even selected a.
Well, I mean, that whole
regional choice for
dynamic
that.
that's going on there. There's all sorts of there's all sorts of layers there. I mean, the character Davis is kind of having a music war with his neighbors, and he's playing mystical, very loud. He also plays brass band music, but it's the first time it's mystical, and the neighbors are responding with Gottschalk, and the mystical wins. But
Has a louder drum beat.
yeah, and it's a louder system. But the irony is that it turns out that those you kind of, I mean, in the beginning of that war, it plays like, oh, his neighbors are so unhip, and so these like evil gentrifiers, and it turns out that they have just as much New Orleans credibility as Davis, really. I mean. And maybe Gottschalk could be a clue to that. If they were listening to the Parker Bell canon, then they would be evil gentrifiers. But because they're listening to Gottschalk, they're
Gottschalk, read hip.
Yeah.
So do you get advice from the producers about, do they submit ideas for music that, does David give you ideas for the music?
They choose more of the music than I do.
Okay.
It's a like I said, it's a collaboration. I mean, any given piece of music might be selected by any of us, but a large portion of the music is already selected in the script the first time I see it. But sometimes there'll be a suggestion. There'll be like, he's listening to bounce music, and so then I go and figure out what should the bounce music be.
Well, I remember this in this one particular case when I wanted the character Mikhail Huseman's Sonny, who I will repeat, this is my little anecdote, but he played no piano when he came to me, and I started teaching him, and I'm a good teacher. The fact is, he worked really, really hard on everything I showed him to progress from zero to where he was. And there was a time over the break where I was showing him, he was like, I know it's the break, I know they haven't picked a song, show me something, I want to learn something. And so I showed him Lonely, Lonely Nights, because that's a great Earl King song and a great R&B song. And then when it came time, and I think 9, that they were going to have him, well, what's he going to play? And I was like, let's have him play Lonely, Lonely Nights, please. He's been shedding on it. It's going to be wonderful. It's good to go. I've got it in the pocket. And they're like, oh, the problem with Lonely, Lonely Nights is that he just broke up with Annie, and we think that might be saying too much per the character. And I was like, oh, God. People play Lonely, Lonely Nights whether they're breaking up or not. I play it at all phases of relationships. It's just a great song, and I like to play it. So we were able, by virtue of that, to get it on. But that was sort of a one where it was almost like I had to get it in, despite the fact that they felt that it was playing to type.
Right. It was too on point.
Right.
We kind of overlooked it that time.
So, do you end up having to do a fair amount of research to figure out some of the tunes?
Yeah.
What things require looking things up, or
yeah,
what
okay,
tasks?
here's a nice example. Was there's a scene in the middle of the season where Antoine Batiste meets a Japanese man who's come to help New Orleans musicians, and he buys him a new trombone. And it was written in the script. When I first got the script, it said, and then they stand in the courtyard right before they say goodbye, and Antoine Batiste plays Jack Teagarden's Shreveport Blues. And he plays a solo, and then the Japanese guy says, Jack Teagarden's Shreveport Blues, and Batiste says, note for note, that's right. And then they shake hands and they walk away. So I'm like, I don't know that tune, what is that? So I go to Google and I'm like, Shreveport Blues, Jack Teagarden. I spent like half an hour trying to Google it and looking for it and everything, and I'm like, I don't know. And so I emailed Simon that night, it was like midnight, and I'm like, do you have a copy of Shreveport Blues by Jack Teagarden? Can you email me an MP3 of it? And he's like, there's no such thing. I just made that up. Put it in the script. I need you to find a tune for him to play.
It's the placeholder blues.
Right. And so I'm like, oh, great, thanks. You could have told me. But so he's like, yeah, find a tune. It needs to be something. It needs to be a trombone solo that is known enough by trad jazz freaks that he could play it and the guy would recognize it. And so I'm like, okay, sure, no problem. And
It was
I'm
going
like,
to be in Kid Ori's.
what would that be? I
It was strutting with some
know.
barbecue.
Right.
Yeah, we ended up being strutting with some barbecue, which, in the end, I asked a lot of people. I asked some trombonists.
Asked a lot of
trad jazz junkie. We went to Louisiana Music Factory and talked to that kid there who loves all that stuff. And there were two choices in the end. One was strutting with some barbecue, and the other one was Ori's Creole trombone. And I picked strutting with some barbecue because I liked the title.
Yes.
I thought it was perfect for Antoine Batiste. There was that whole thing about barbecue and Kermit and the smell of barbecue, and so it was just great. But yeah, that was a lot of research and a lot of collaboration and a lot of help from a few different jazz historians and
You've got a wide network of brain trusts in a lot of genres across the city, really.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know all that stuff.
Yeah, if you look at the again, I just when I saw, there's so much of the music that you just are not always listening to, and when I saw the whole list, it's a really huge list, and there's a wide variety of genres, and it, when you look at it, almost seems as though there was an effort to spread around the love, to pick a lot of different artists, but it also does always fit the character. It seemed to me, for example, these patterns started to emerge, like Jeanette Desautels seems to have very eclectic taste in what she plays at her restaurant. Mm-hmm. And you started to think of her as a person, oh yeah, I have friends who would love to listen, to go to that place to listen to that, and so her taste, appeals to me. Or, I'd love to go to Gigi's and check out the jukebox, and
yeah, they do have an amazing jukebox at Gigi's.
They
I
sure
actually
do.
don't know of any jukebox that's quite that good in real life.
And I'm hoping that maybe people will have some questions, but I have one more question for you, Davis, and that is, sure, why did you pick the Mardi Gras Indian clip that we saw earlier? Because I think you must have had a point to make.
It was a bouncing point for a couple of anecdotes. I mean, as much as, well, first of all, people are like, well, wow, isn't this exciting? And, isn't this great for you? And it's doing a lot for your career. And basically any idiot could have come to town and said, here, I'm going to throw some money at you and elevate your status a little bit. And I'd have been, yeah, but, like, to be able to work with David Simon, it's like, wow, here's a person who, like, personality and politics-wise, we have a lot in common, and kind of I like to think, and it's been great to work with them, and yet there was something where it's like, this is close to perfect, but this is not perfect. Through the pilot, and I'm like, this is really good, and obviously it's the best depiction of New Orleans that's been done yet, but that's because the bar is really somewhere down below there, and so obviously it's anything gets close is better. And it was when I went to just to watch a little bit of them filming the scene, and they were at what you think, like, you're kind of like, an abandoned house in the lower ninth ward, like, play to the tear jerk. But then there's this group of Mardi Gras Indians who I'd never really seen that same group of people assembled before, working with and a lot of people say Clark Peters, how does Clark Peters exactly get in and become an embodified Mardi Gras Indian? And from there, you can kind of take a look into his bona fides and see that it's pretty deep. He was actually in the original Broadway production of One Mo' Time. He's the basso profundo on Boogie Nights. He sang with Joan Armatrading. That aside, he's actually a classically trained baritone and sings Porgy in the role of Porgy and Bess in London's West End. So, huge amount of musical theater in his background. And just when I went to see them filming that scene of all these people, just drums and voice doing Indian Red, and it was on kind of this overcast day in the lower ninth ward, and they're filming this, and that for me was my holy moment, that this is really, really, really getting it right, and that they're really on to something. And so I thought it was very special. The other thing is that Indian Red is a fine example of how a traditional song can come and mutate across so many styles and be reinterpreted in so many different ways. It's very emblematic of New Orleans music and its genre crossingness, because in season 1 alone, we see Dr. John and people in the studio performing Indian Red. We see
Donald Harrison.
We see Donald Harrison playing Indian Red. We see those people chanting Indian Red, and then also I believe it's in episode 10 from that Baby Dodd's record that I keep talking about. You hear the Danny Barker version of Indian Red, so you get to see how it's a traditional chant that was adopted to, we saw that in kind of like a rock context and a modern jazz context in its pure traditional form, and in a sort of an early jump blues interpretation. So I think that's kind of emblematic of New Orleans and emblematic of New Orleans music, and we don't have a lot of reverence for genres here. I think we just kind of take things and take them where we want to.
I think one of the reasons that we wanted to have this presentation, this panel today, this performance, was that people all over New Orleans are having the sense that they're getting it right. And you are getting it right. And we love to see all our friends, and even in that scene, I didn't recognize everybody. Like, I don't know Daryl Montana by sight, but
right.
I mean, there were certainly Monk Boudreaux, and you begin to see your friends, your neighbors, and all your favorite music acts, which is great. And so we thought this is something that deserves appreciating and mentioning more. And I don't mean to, by the way, in this forum, to depreciate at all the brass bands. It's just that it was a little tricky to have more than one band playing the music, and your band doesn't always play the brass band repertoire. But
well, I mean, I think that there's a whole lot of really great music that I absolutely love the parts of the show that are all about me. But I also have a vast appreciation for all the stuff that isn't me, and there's a whole bunch of really great New Orleans music and all kinds of genres and things that I have nothing to do with, I mean, not the hugest fan of modern jazz, but I think it's really great that it's in there. It deserves to be in there. On the other hand, I am not a purveyor of brass band music per se, although I do play a mean bass drum in case anyone's hiring, and I have a telephone.
And you did the brass band jam on WWOZ.
But I mean, I come to brass band from the perspective of just a huge fan. I've always had a massive love and appreciation for this music ever since I discovered it, and I was, 15 or 16 or whatnot. Or actually the brass bands that used to, the jazz funerals that used to go down my house between Green Street Cemetery and the Baptist Church on Birth or something like that, way uptown, Carrollton, folks, you know. Born and raised in Carrollton, live in Treme. It's dual citizenship. I can, but yeah, you know, I mean, I don't necessarily play all this, but I love all this stuff, and I think it's great, everything they've done. So.
Did you, when you were picking either live or recorded brass bands, was there a sense of, you know, getting a few different ones? Because I noticed there were several different brass bands.
Oh, sure. Spread it around is the kind of
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we wanted to use as many different. I mean, there is quite specifically one of the things we're doing on the show is trying to support the New Orleans music community. I mean, we want to. I mean, a personal interest of mine is to spread HBO's money around to musicians in New Orleans, and so the idea that you could, you know, just give musicians exposure and work, and that's very gratifying to be able to do that at a time when a lot of people are having a hard time here. And
Katie Red has a new car.
All right.
Katie Red. Ben Elman told me, he was like, yeah, Touch. He calls it Touch by Treme. Ben Elman does. He's like, Katie Red showed up to do some recording with Galactic the other day, and she's driving a new car, and Ben's like, damn, Touch by Treme. Huh? So,
that's awesome. That's great.
It's a 2002, but it's new to her.
Right. But so yeah, you know, an effort to work with a lot of different musicians, because it's also, you know, for all of those reasons, to give people exposure to. And because there are a lot of musicians, it would be weird if you had the same brass band all the time. So.
Right, even though it sometimes seems that Rebirth is everywhere at the same time.
But Rebirth is everywhere.
Or in the show. Rebirth are only in the show twice.
Yes, no, I meant just, you know, that's a standard thing in New Orleans, that sometimes you can see Rebirth playing at two different places at the same time.
And the fact that Matt Perrine is playing with everybody all the time everywhere is also dead accurate. You know, so.
Right.
Right.
I call it Matt Perrine ubiquity syndrome.
Right.
So hopefully in season 2 we're gonna have more spreading of the love.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it is also true. I mean, I also enjoy it when you see the same musicians pop up in different places, because that's also feels like the real New Orleans too. I mean, you know, the fact that Jack Fine was playing with the Jazz Vipers at the Spotted Cat, and then later on he's playing in the Musicians Clinic gig at the airport. You know, those kind of things. I mean, there's all sorts of, and other cases where people even pop up in a very different kind of band.
Yeah. Certainly, the Antoine Baptiste character has played with a huge variety of different things.
We've always said that in New Orleans you need to be in 6 or 7 bands in order to starve, you know.
Yes. So, you know, I realize that we are getting to the end of our time here, and perhaps you'd like to play us out with a tune, and then those of you, or two, and then those of you who have questions can come up and just ask them, because we'll stay around a little bit, and hopefully, if you have some questions, we can get to those.
Oh, okay. All right.
Would you like to do that?
Sure.
It's always good to play out with a song.
I'll play out a song or two, and while I'm playing the song or two, you'll have about approximately 3.5 minutes to come up with a really clever question. Okay.
Lonely Night.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually think I mistakenly credited this to Smiley Lewis on this blog I was writing for eMusic. I wrote a blog for eMusic, spent hours and hours and hours writing, and I got my statement on CD Baby, and I made $19 from them. But, whatever. This is actually an Earl King song. There's been some lonely, lonely nights. Oh, baby, yeah, since you've been gone. Tears I cried on my pillow. Tears I cried all night long. The things And my apologies to this really beautiful 7-foot Steinway that I'm abusing. I'm sure it's used to much better players. But I'm going to close out with this song called "Do Me That Way." "Do Me That Way" is also a song on this record, once and featured DJ. The reason why I want to play it is because it was while this song, David Simon was kind of plugging me for information and pumping my brain, and there were no contracts and no promises and no money coming through yet. So one of the things he did in good faith was to place these songs on the wire. So it's funny because there's a scene in episode 1 of season 5 of The Wire where there's a group of journalists and they're in a bar at the end of the day discussing their day's work, and this song was playing in the background on the jukebox, and that's what we call fiction, because my song is not on jukeboxes in New Orleans, much less Baltimore. But also I think this is funny because this was when we were first mixing the song, where I first actually met Blake Lay in Sound One Studios in the Brill Building. Was when I met him for the meeting where they were going to mix in the song. So,
also the other story about that one is that David Simon was a journalist at the Baltimore Sun, and so I asked him, what do journalists in Baltimore listen to? What kind of music? Because I'd like to get it right. He was like, we don't want to get that right. Our characters, journalists, need to have better music taste than real journalists. So they have excellent taste because they listen to Davis Rogan.
Okay, great. Again, fiction. So here's this tune. It goes like this. Aurora, do both things, right?
I'd like to thank you all for coming on behalf of the Loyola Center for the Study of New Orleans, the Center for Music and Entrepreneurship, and myself, Janice Aslaw from the College of Music. I'd like to thank our speakers, Blake Lay, Davis Rogan, and the great band, Aurora Nealand, Jimbo Walsh, and Charlie Kohlmeyer. So keep celebrating New Orleans music, and if there are a few questions, feel free to come on up, and we'll just chat about things.
While we're getting one, I also wanted to say this was the ultimate sort of meta irony moment today when is this it's on?
Yeah.
Okay. When I ran into, I'm riding my bike, and one of the set designers for the art department drives up in his truck, and he holds up this poster for the show tonight, right? And I was like, where'd you get this poster? He's like, I took it off a pole. I said, why'd you take it off the pole? He said, well, we're shooting a scene outside of Sonny's apartment, and this poster was on a pole on Dumaine Street. You know, we couldn't have it in the show. I'm like, art meets life. No problem. Disaster a minute on the show now.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you
Thanks for coming out.
one more time. I will.
Question. Oh, we'll do it.
Yeah, no, we'll just do.